Lin Feng was very patient. In the past 100 years, he had let Yan Jun cultivate by his side. Although this way there might not be much opportunity relying on Lin Feng's acceleration of time, Yan Jun had actually cultivated for a long time. Even without opportunities, after a long time, Yan Jun had finally broken through to become a title diva, and a peak title diva at that. At this point, improvement could no longer be attained through ascetic cultivation. Yan Jun did need opportunities. Moreover, Lin Feng could vaguely sense that a great cataclysm was brewing. Yan Jun had to leave. Only by leaving could the great cataclysm possibly erupt. This was Yan Jun's fate. Lin Feng had actually already delayed it for 100 years. Lin Feng was even certain that once Yan Jun left the ancestral land of the Yan clan, he would definitely cause a major upheaval and trigger the cataclysm. However, wasn't this what Lin Feng needed? He also needed Yan Jun to grow into a supreme diva faster, and even become the 5th progenitor. Only then could Yan Jun sense the Kiliacosm core space, and help Lin Feng take the last step. Master, I have a request. As expected, after sensing that he could no longer improve, Yan Jun took the initiative to come to Lin Feng. What is it? Master, I would like to go out and investigate the matter of my parents back then. Your parents? Lin Feng knew that Yan Jun's parents had special identities. His father was from the Yan clan, while his mother's identity was mysterious. It was very likely that she was a descendant of the bloodlines of the other 3 progenitors. Yan Jun wanted to investigate the whole story. Perhaps this was the lead-up to the Great Cataclysm. Lin Feng had no reason to stop him. All right, it's time for you to go out and venture properly. You're now a top entity among titled divas. Moreover, your diva's true form from the fusion of 4 progenitors' bloodlines gives you the strength to rival supreme divas. However, you have to be careful too. You're not a match for those truly powerful supreme divas yet. Master, don't worry. I won't act recklessly. Lin Feng nodded. He had said everything he needed to say, so he waved his hand. Yan Jun was a little reluctant, but in the end, he gritted his teeth, transformed into a stream of light, and flew out of the Yan clan's ancestral land. With his departure, a storm brewed, and the great cataclysm gradually began. Swoosh! In the vast void, Lin Feng's Kiliacosm sovereign's true body was still staring at the small Kiliacosm in front of him. He had already spent hundreds of years in this small Kiliacosm. Although this bit of time was nothing to a Kiliacosm sovereign, it was still very rare for Lin Feng, an esteemed Kiliacosm sovereign, to spend hundreds of years in a small Kiliacosm. Soon, once the great cataclysm begins and Yan Jun grows to his peak, he will definitely be able to sense the Kiliacosm core space. Then, it will be time to reap the rewards. Lin Feng muttered softly. He had spent a lot of effort for such a complete portion of small Kiliacosm origin. I wonder how the Chaos Dojo is doing? Lin Feng turned around and looked in the direction of the Chaos Dojo in the medium Kiliacosm. He was far from the Chaos Dojo now. Even Kiliacosm sovereigns could not deduce his exact location. Of course, no one could contact Lin Feng either. Hence, Lin Feng knew nothing about the situation in the Chaos Dojo now. He did not know if that Kiliacosm sovereign nonary star would be so patient. At this moment, Supremacy Epic was presiding over the Chaos Dojo. However, the current situation in the Chaos Dojo was not too good, and was even a little bleak. Supremacy Epic, 2 more of our 3-star supremacies were attacked by an unknown faction in the Panadu Kiliacosm and have already fallen. This is already the 21st 3-star supremacy to have fallen recently. His Majesty the Kiliacosm Sovereign. A 3-star supremacy was reported to Supremacy Epic. He actually wanted Supremacy Epic to inform the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign to open a passage, and allow those 3-star supremacies to return to the Chaos Dojo. Currently, many supremacies of the Chaos Dojo had been attacked in various small Kiliacosms. The goal was very clear. Someone was targeting the Chaos Dojo. If this continued, the 3-star and 2-star supremacies who descended into the various small Kiliacosms would probably all be annihilated. The key was that they did not even know who the enemy was. It was said that many factions were involved. Many three-star supremacies had their own guesses about what this meant. They originally thought that since the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign had killed Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyhorn, the Chaos Dojo would have stopped being targeted. However, who would have thought that it would actually happen again not long after it stopped? However, Supremacy Epic could not say anything about the difficult situation he was in. He knew that Lin Feng was not in the Chaos Dojo now, and he was the only one who knew. This was top secret. He did not have the ability to open the Ascension passage at all, which meant there was no way to bring those three-star supremacies back to the medium Kiliakosm at all. They could only face the matter head-on. Pass down the order. Tell the supremacies of the Chaos Dojo not to worry about competing for the small Kiliakosm origin. Hide yourselves and prioritize staying alive. Supremacy Epic heaved a long sigh. This was the only way now. If only there were another Kiliakosm Sovereign in the Chaos Dojo, even if it was just a pseudo-Kiliakosm Sovereign. A pseudo-Kiliakosm Sovereign would still be a Kiliakosm Sovereign. Apart from not being able to evolve a small Kiliakosm, not being able to undergo epical cataclysms, and not being able to increase their strength, they would be no different from a one-cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign. At the very least, the Ascension passage could be opened. They could almost completely replace a true Kiliakosm Sovereign, allowing the Kiliakosm Sovereigns to focus on cultivation. Unfortunately, there was no pseudo-Kiliakosm Sovereign in the Chaos Dojo now. Understood. But once the Kiliakosm Sovereign exits seclusion, we must counterattack. That's right. We must counterattack. Many three-star supremacies were filled with righteous anger. They also felt a sense of belonging to the Chaos Dojo and thought that they were members of the Chaos Dojo. Now that the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign was in seclusion, they could not disturb him and could only swallow their anger. However, this did not mean that they would endure forever. They were all waiting for the return of the Kiliakosm Sovereign. However, only Supremacy Epic's eyes were filled with worry. He could guess how terrifying the enemies of the Chaos Dojo were this time. How could someone who could mobilize so many factions be ordinary? However, the Chaos Dojo should be fine. No matter what, Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart would still take care of the Chaos Dojo. However, even so, Supremacy Epic was still worried. He was worried about the safety of the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign, Lin Feng. He knew very well that as long as Lin Feng was alive and safe, nothing would happen to the Chaos Dojo. Otherwise, the Chaos Dojo would be like rootless duckweed, at risk of collapsing at any moment. Just like the Skyhorn Dojo, once Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyhorn died, the Skyhorn Dao Dojo also collapsed. Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart, do you really want to stop me? Outside the Chaos Dojo, two Kiliakosm Sovereigns stood in the void. Kiliakosm Sovereign Feral Dragon, go back and tell this to Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon. Even if he acts as the vanguard like this, will he be able to survive the third epical cataclysm? It's not worth it for an esteemed Kiliakosm Sovereign to do this for a little gain. Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart said coldly. Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart, do you realize that that great entity no longer has much patience? Kiliakosm Sovereign Feral Dragon, you can just report back. You're only a pseudo-Kiliakosm Sovereign and can't make the call. Nor do you understand how complicated the situation is. If you insist on being obstinate, I don't mind killing you. You? Kiliakosm Sovereign Feral Dragon opened his mouth, but did not say anything as he looked at Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart. After all, he was only a pseudo-Kiliakosm Sovereign. Even at this point, no true Kiliakosm Sovereign had come forward to deal with the Chaos Dojo. This was because they could not find the true location of the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign. A hidden Kiliakosm Sovereign was true terror. All right, I'll go back and report to His Majesty the Kiliakosm Sovereign. Kiliakosm Sovereign Feral Dragon did not push the matter. He turned around and quickly disappeared. Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart looked at the Chaos Dojo in the distance and heaved a long sigh. Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign, this is all I can do. Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyheart shook his head helplessly and disappeared as well. What? My mother is a descendant of the Kuan clan. Yen Jun's entire body emitted a terrifying aura. The four progenitors' bloodlines had already completely fused into one. condensing into a terrifying diva's true form. Every one of the few titled divas in front of him was a famous diva, but now they were trembling in front of Yen Jun, as if they sensed the threat of death. That's right, that's right. Your mother is indeed a descendant of the Kuan clan. What happened between your mother and your father back then had nothing to do with us. We were all minor characters and were just carrying out orders. But you've all attacked, so you all deserve to die. A sharp glint flashed across Yen Jun's eyes. Then, with a wave of his hand, infinite fire of Genesis instantly enveloped these titled divas. In the blink of an eye, these titled divas were burned to ashes. Then, Yen Jun went straight to the ancestral land of the Kuan clan. He went on a killing spree and challenged the many titled divas of the Kuan clan, defeating them all one by one. Even the few supreme divas were not Yen Jun's match. In the end, it was only when the invincible diva of the Kuan clan attacked that Yen Jun was severely injured. However, he was only severely injured. Yen Jun had used some unknown method to escape. Next, Yen Jun obtained the support of the Mang clan of the four progenitors. His strength improved greatly, and he finally became a supreme diva. Then, he went to the ancestral land of the Kuan clan again. Even that supreme diva from the Kuan clan's ancestral land, despite suppressing Yen Jun, could not do anything to him anymore. As news gradually traveled back to the ancestral land of the Yen clan, everyone was dumbfounded. They could not imagine that Yen Jun would actually soar into the sky as soon as he left the ancestral land of the Yen clan. The great cataclysm has begun. Lin Feng looked at the void. He could clearly sense that there seemed to be a trace of cataclysmic power in the void. Although it was very, very faint, it was indeed cataclysmic power. This was the epical cataclysm, which had erupted with the bloodlines of the four progenitors as the catalyst. The true fuse was Yen Jun. He was the key to the eruption of the cataclysm, and the protagonist of Providence. In fact, this involved a competition between the four progenitors. Otherwise, how could the Mang clan support Yen Jun? They even helped Yen Jun become a supreme diva who could contend with the invincible diva. The current Yen Jun's momentum was already established. He would completely stir the bloodlines of the four progenitors, and stirring the bloodlines of the four progenitors would also stir the entire small kiliocosm. The great cataclysm was already inevitable. However, Lin Feng was still silent. He did not make any moves at all. He was more composed than any of the supreme divas in the ancestral land of the Yen clan, as if Yen Jun was not his disciple at all. Another 100 years passed. Yen Jun's momentum had been fully established. He had even defeated the invincible Grand Elder among the supreme elders of the Kuan clan, and had already become a true invincible entity. In fact, with the four progenitors' bloodlines converging in his body, he was the invincible diva among the invincible. He even showed signs of combining the four progenitors' bloodlines into one completely to form a new bloodline. There was already such a trend. Wherever Yen Jun passed, even the ancestral lands of the progenitors' bloodlines, it ended in shambles. It was destined to encounter a great cataclysm. Finally, the progenitor Kuan attacked. He woke up from his slumber and severely injured Yen Jun the moment he attacked. However, Yen Jun was not dead. Instead, with the help of progenitor Mang, he finally comprehended the mysteries of the four progenitors' bloodlines and transformed them into a new bloodline in one fell swoop. Moreover, it was a new progenitor's bloodline. The fifth progenitor was born, progenitor Jun. The progenitor kiliocosm was shaken to an unparalleled level. A fifth progenitor had actually been born. This was something no one had expected. In a short period of time, Yen Jun had soared to the top. He had finally cultivated to become the fifth progenitor through cultivation after birth. What a magnificent feat! For a moment, countless divas were thrilled. Countless lifeforms swarmed over and gathered under the command of progenitor Jun, forming a huge faction. This was the general momentum. After all, a natural progenitor would always be a progenitor. Most lifeforms were acquired lifeforms. They also wanted hope, dreams, and becoming progenitors. In the past, it was impossible. But now, progenitor Jun had made the impossible possible. It turned out that acquired lifeforms could also become progenitors through cultivation. This was equivalent to opening a path to success for acquired lifeforms. Although innate lifeforms were strong, almost all lifeforms were acquired lifeforms. Acquired lifeforms were the mainstream. Hence, the faction founded by Progenitor June, which was not based upon the bloodline, became the largest faction in the entire small Kiliacosm in one leap. However, Progenitor June had yet to cross the last threshold. Progenitor Kuan, Progenitor Yen, and Progenitor Jiu-In joined forces to challenge Progenitor June. Only Progenitor Mang did not express her stance. However, although Progenitor Mang appeared to support Progenitor June, she had never responded directly all these years. This was Progenitor June's greatest cataclysm. Everyone was looking forward to the outcome of this battle. This battle might very well determine the power structure of the Progenitor Kiliacosm in the future. In a wide void, Progenitor Kuan with a massive body stared coldly at Progenitor June. It was not just Kuan. Even Progenitor Jiu-In and Progenitor Yen were staring coldly at Progenitor June. However, Progenitor June showed no fear at all. The current Yen June had long become the Progenitor June. He had truly become a peak entity in the entire world. Even when facing the three progenitors, his expression remained unchanged. "I'm not confident in winning this battle." Progenitor June spoke slowly. "We are not confident either. This battle is inevitable. This is our fate," Progenitor Yen said as well. There was actually no deep feud between them. Even though there were some matters regarding Yen Jun's parents back then, these were all minor matters to progenitors. However, they had no choice but to fight now. This was not a personal feud, but an inevitable event. This was their fate. Even progenitors could not escape this fate. "Let's fight. Kill." Without any unnecessary words, both parties attacked. Progenitor Mang, Progenitor Yen, Progenitor Jiu-In had already existed since the entire Progenitor Kiliacosm was born. Their power was simply extraordinary and majestic to the extreme. Even Progenitor June, who was not afraid of anyone in a one-on-one battle, still appeared to struggle when facing a joint strike from the three progenitors. However, no matter how hard it was, he still resisted it. Crunch. Suddenly, a figure appeared behind him. A bloody hole had appeared in Progenitor June's chest. His flesh squirmed incessantly, trying to repair the wound. However, there seemed to be a strange power in the wound that was forcefully blocking the recovery of the wound. "Mang, Progenitor Mang, you've attacked too. You've also become my enemy." Yen Jun looked at the Progenitor Mang with a complicated expression. Progenitor Mang was an extremely beautiful woman. He had always thought that this woman would become the love of his life. In fact, this woman would not hesitate to make an enemy of the three progenitors for him. But now he felt that he was wrong, absurdly so. Progenitor Mang was like a shadow. Her beautiful eyes stared at Yen Jun as she said with a pained expression, "June, it's wrong. Everything is wrong. We're all just pawns. You're destined to become the fifth progenitor, but you shouldn't have hunted us all down. Even if there are some conflicts between the four progenitors, we're connected as branches of the same tree, because we're basically one, the cornerstone of the entire world. Let go. There's no point in continuing to fight." Yen Jun was in great pain. He could feel his life force draining away. But letting go? That was impossible. This was his ideal. It was impossible for him to let go. Similarly, the four progenitors could not possibly let go. This was also their fate. Hence, even Progenitor Mang, who had always supported Yen Jun, betrayed Yen Jun and attacked him. Yen Jun's life force was draining rapidly. He knew that he had failed this time and lost completely. However, he could not accept it. He really could not accept it. He felt that his mission was far from complete. "Good disciple, you've already done very well to have come this far. However, you can't die yet. Do you still remember the promise you made to me back then?" Suddenly, a familiar voice sounded in the void. Yen Jun suddenly lifted his head, and his eyes widened as he stared intently at a certain place in the void. Swoosh! A figure stepped out of the void. His white clothes fluttered, and he still had the same aura and appearance. Yen Jun felt as if he had returned to hundreds of years ago, when he was still an ordinary person who was bullied. "Master!" Yen Jun muttered softly, but his expression became incomparably complicated. You're the master of progenitor Jun, Diva Yen Yun? I think he's a descendant of the Yen clan. A supreme diva has appeared here. When Lin Feng appeared, even progenitor Jun was a little stunned. All these years, as progenitor Jun had a tense relationship with the other three progenitors, even after he became the progenitor, he had never returned to the ancestral land of the Yen clan. Naturally, he did not see Lin Feng again, and Lin Feng did not even look for Yen Jun again. Now that he had suddenly appeared, progenitor Jun was a little confused. Promise? Of course I haven't forgotten my promise to Master back then. Master, what exactly is your goal? Yen Jun asked in a low voice. He was already progenitor Jun now. He was no longer a mere diva like before, but a great progenitor. Having been fighting for all these years, especially the recent years, the imposing air on him had become stronger, and even supreme divas could not withstand it. However, Lin Feng appeared very relaxed and calm, as if he was completely unaffected. Yen Jun could naturally sense that this master of his was very mysterious and abnormal. He was definitely not an ordinary supreme diva. Ordinary supreme divas would definitely not behave like this, speaking confidently and fearlessly before 5 progenitors. It's good that you remember. You're already in danger. The person you trust the most has also betrayed you. But I can help you. Master, you can help me? That's right. I can help you. Lin Feng stepped forward. He was still only a supreme diva. He had not become a progenitor, but that did not mean that he did not have the power to deal with progenitors. Good disciple, I know that you can sense the core of the progenitor kiliacosm. Bring me into the core of the progenitor kiliacosm. What? Enter the core of the progenitor kiliacosm. Not just Yen Jun, the expressions of the other 4 progenitors also changed drastically. How dare you covet the core of the world? No one is allowed to enter there, not even progenitors like us. That's right. Who exactly are you? What are your intentions for deliberately entering the core of the progenitor kiliacosm? Humph, you're just a supreme diva. Do you think you can stop progenitors like us? The 4 progenitors were all enraged. Among them, progenitor Kuan manifested his progenitor's true form and blasted towards Lin Feng. At this moment, even the severely injured progenitor Jun could not withstand the mighty power. A sharp glint flashed across Lin Feng's eyes. He growled, "Shut up!" Then, with a thought, his kiliacosm sovereign's true body outside the progenitor kiliacosm suddenly opened his eyes and pressed down with a finger. Rumble. A finger pressed down. Even if it was just a finger, it was still the kiliacosm sovereign's true body. It was a strike from a kiliacosm sovereign. In ordinary small kiliacosms, once the kiliacosm sovereign's true body descended, the small kiliacosm would collapse instantly, and the epical cataclysm would be instantly triggered. Lin Feng only extended a finger, causing the entire progenitor kiliacosm to shake and wail. Everyone seemed to feel a terrifying pressure, especially the 4 progenitors who were almost suffocating. What is that? Progenitor Kuan stared blankly at the finger that was rapidly descending from the void. It was just a finger, but it actually made him feel an irresistible sense of powerlessness. Not just the progenitor Kuan, but the other progenitors reacted the same way. They all stared blankly at the finger in the void, speechless for a long time. You are a life form from beyond the world. Finally, progenitor Jiuyin seemed to understand Lin Feng's identity at once. However, it was useless. How could a strike from Lin Feng's true form as a kiliacosm sovereign be ordinary? Boom! The 4 progenitors could not resist Lin Feng's finger at all and were crushed by it. At the same time, space gradually shattered, and a vast cataclysmic power erupted instantly. The epical cataclysm had erupted in advance. The moment the epical cataclysm erupted, Lin Feng's finger instantly dissipated. He did not dare to come into contact with any trace of cataclysmic power. Even if he attacked, there was actually a certain degree of risk. Back then in the small kiliacosm, the reason why kiliacosm sovereign Skyhorn did not attack with his true body was that at that time, the epical cataclysm was about to erupt in the small kiliacosm. Moreover, it was the 9th epical cataclysm. The epical cataclysm might erupt as soon as a Chiliocosm sovereign interfered. Even a Chiliocosm sovereign would be affected. In this progenitor Chiliocosm, even when Lin Feng's true body intervened, he was very cautious. He did not dare to attack when the epical cataclysm was imminent. Instead, he intervened now. Although it still triggered the epical cataclysm in advance, he was not affected at all, and was not contaminated by any trace of cataclysmic power. More importantly, a trace of Lin Feng's soul had descended into the progenitor Chiliocosm. Even if the epical cataclysm erupted, he could still obtain benefits from it. Of course, Lin Feng was not counting on this little amount of benefits. Looking at the sudden upheaval, Yan Jun fell silent. The 4 progenitors were dead. They were all dead. They did not even have the slightest ability to resist before being crushed into dust. The esteemed progenitors appeared so fragile before that finger. "Master, this is your work, right?" Yan Jun asked in a low voice. "That's right. That's my true body. A mere small Chiliocosm can be destroyed with a thought from me." He understood. He understood everything now. It turned out that the diva Yan Yun in front of him, Yan Jun's master, was not a supreme diva at all, but a great entity from beyond the progenitor Chiliocosm, an entity that far exceeded Yan Jun's imagination. Yan Jun heaved a long sigh and could not help but smile resignedly. "Master is indeed exceptional. Originally, when I became a progenitor, I thought that I had already surpassed Master. But from the looks of it, in front of Master, I'm nothing. Forget it. Forget it. Everything is in the past. Even the great cataclysm has erupted. The entire world will be completely destroyed. Do you hate me? Hate? Why would I hate you? I know that this great cataclysm has nothing to do with you, and would erupt sooner or later, Master. I am the key to triggering the great cataclysm in the first place. If I must hate someone, I would hate myself for not being able to stop the great cataclysm. Master, do you want to enter the core of the progenitor Chiliocosm? That's right. Even if I will die if I enter the core of the progenitor Chiliocosm. Anyone who enters will die. If Master insists on entering, I will naturally fulfill my promise to you back then." Yan Jun took a deep breath, and then a special fluctuation appeared in the void. Vaguely, the providence on his body boiled, and seemed to have opened a passage. Even Lin Feng could not help but feel a little excited. This was because he sensed traces of the aura of the Chiliocosm core space, the Chiliocosm core space he had yearned for. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, Yan Jun and Lin Feng disappeared. In the next moment, they arrived at a pitch-black space. This was the Chiliocosm core space. However, at this moment, the Chiliocosm core space was filled with violent cataclysmic power. It seemed boundless as it swept over, and no one could evade it. Master, I've already fulfilled my promise to you and sent you to the core of the progenitor Chiliocosm. Yan Jun had a smile on his face. The cataclysm in the Chiliocosm core space had also completely erupted, instantly dragging Yan Jun into it and crushing him into dust. A pawn. Yan Jun was just a pawn. However, he was not a pawn to someone but to fate. In the Chiliocosm core space, Yan Jun's rich providence was useless. Lin Feng sighed with lament. He had originally intended to bring Yan Jun to leave this world and head to the medium Chiliocosm, but from the looks of it, he no longer had a chance. However, in the end, Yan Jun had kept his promise and brought him to the Chiliocosm core space. Whether he could obtain a complete portion of small Chiliocosm origin would depend on Lin Feng's last step. Chiliocosm core space. I finally arrived at the Chiliocosm core space. Lin Feng's heart was incomparably excited. Ever since he became the Chiliocosm sovereign, there were actually very few things that could make him excited. Only entering the Chiliocosm core space and obtaining a complete portion of small Chiliocosm origin could make him feel a trace of anticipation and excitement. However, this was still the last step. Faced with the surging cataclysmic power, the difficulty for Lin Feng to obtain the small Chiliocosm origin was obvious. It had to be known that even Yan Jun, who was the progenitor at the peak of power in this world, could not withstand a trace of cataclysmic power. He was reduced to dust and fell completely. The energy Lin Feng was carrying now was only at the level of a mere supreme diva. How could he resist this cataclysmic power? However, Lin Feng had his own methods. After all, he was a Kiliacosm sovereign, and his realm was superior. Moreover, he grasped the principle of spacetime. Only the principle of spacetime was Lin Feng's greatest trump card. His success would depend on the principle of spacetime. River of spacetime. With a thought, Lin Feng instantly manifested the river of spacetime. Even though he was only a portion of the soul, these were rules he had comprehended. Having completely comprehended the principle of spacetime, regardless of strength, he could still use it. The only difference was whether his physical strength could withstand the burden caused by using the principle of spacetime. However, as long as he did not have time to accelerate or reverse spacetime, there would be no burden at all. Boom! Apart from cataclysmic power and the small Kiliacosm origin, there could be nothing else in the Kiliacosm core space. No matter what other power or supreme treasure it was nothing in the Kiliacosm core space. But now a long river had suddenly appeared. It was faintly discernible, looking very strange and miraculous, stretching across the Kiliacosm core space. This was the river of spacetime, the true principle of spacetime. Be it in the small Kiliacosm, the medium Kiliacosm, or the void, the principle of spacetime would not be affected at all. It was transcendent and transcended everything. As the river of spacetime appeared, Lin Feng realized that the cataclysmic power swept directly through the river of spacetime, as if the river of spacetime did not exist at all. As long as he did not accelerate time or reverse spacetime, the river of spacetime would be transcendent. However, ordinary people could not enter the river of spacetime at all. If they entered, they would gradually reach the end of spacetime. And what was at the end of spacetime? It was nothingness, a void. At the end of time and space was nothingness, and it was no different from falling. The life imprint would completely disappear. However, Lin Feng was different. He had mastered the principle of spacetime and could roam the river of spacetime. As long as he did not really want to return to the past or accelerate time, the burden on him was almost zero. Lin Feng strolled in the river of spacetime. He could see the mighty cataclysmic power around him constantly rushing out of the Kiliacosm core space, wreaking havoc in the entire small Kiliacosm. After triggering the epical cataclysm in advance this time, this small Kiliacosm would not be able to survive it at all. It was very likely that it would collapse completely. Not all small Kiliacosms would follow the prescribed order and experience the 9 epical cataclysms. In reality, many small Kiliacosms could not actually hold out for 9 epical cataclysms. Often, they would be on the verge of collapse during the 3rd, 4th, or 5th epical cataclysms. The epical cataclysm was a trial for cultivators in the small Kiliacosm, but at the same time it was also a trial for the entire small Kiliacosm. Once it failed, it would be completely annihilated. Lin Feng did not pay attention to the cataclysmic power. His river of spacetime was completely unaffected, so he was naturally unaffected while in the river of spacetime. However, Lin Feng's goal was not to spectate in the river of spacetime. He had to obtain the small Kiliacosm origin in the Kiliacosm core space. But the small Kiliacosm origin was filled with cataclysmic power. It enveloped the small Kiliacosm origin densely. Even if Lin Feng's true body came, he could not guarantee that he would not be affected by the cataclysmic power. In particular, his true body was only a 1 cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign. If he was attacked by this cataclysmic power, his 2nd epical cataclysm might erupt. Lin Feng was not confident that he could survive that. River of spacetime. Lin Feng activated the river of spacetime again. It expanded rapidly like ripples in water, and enveloped the small Kiliacosm origin. However, at the same time, the cataclysmic power was also swept into the river of spacetime. Cataclysmic power was also a type of power. A large amount of cataclysmic power surged into the river of spacetime in a frenzy. The river of spacetime automatically circulated, about to completely eradicate this cataclysmic power as it traveled to the end of spacetime. However, this required Lin Feng to bear the burden. A huge burden. After all, the cataclysmic power was very powerful. Lin Feng did not know if his body could withstand it. Crunch. Soon, Lin Feng's diva's true form could not hold out anymore and quickly collapsed. However, Lin Feng did not mind. This was just a body, and it was a body that had descended. It had little to do with him. This trace of soul was the most important thing to him. As long as his soul was not destroyed, Lin Feng would not suffer any losses from this dissension. As a large amount of cataclysmic power was eradicated by the river of spacetime, Lin Feng felt the burden becoming lighter and lighter, until there was no more burden at all. In front of him was a large mass of small kiliocosm origin. "I've finally succeeded. A complete portion of small kiliocosm origin." Lin Feng was also a little excited. He did not just obtain a portion of small kiliocosm origin. This time, he had successfully obtained a complete portion small kiliocosm origin by descending with his soul. This meant that it was entirely feasible to descend with the soul and cultivate with the aid of the principle of spacetime in the small kiliocosm. He could obtain a complete portion of small kiliocosm origin. This was easier than any method to obtain the small kiliocosm origin. Of course, the prerequisite was that he had the principle of spacetime. Without the principle of spacetime, how could Lin Feng stand out in the progenitor kiliocosm in such a short period of time? Without the principle of spacetime, how could he have helped Yen Jun cultivate so quickly and become a progenitor? All of these depended on the principle of spacetime. It's time to go back. With a thought from Lin Feng, the river of spacetime was instantly teleported out of the kiliocosm core space. Lin Feng looked at the mighty cataclysmic power around him again. There was no longer any hope for this progenitor kiliocosm. It was on the verge of collapse. No one could save it, and it was no longer of any value. Hence, Lin Feng left the progenitor kiliocosm directly, and his soul returned directly to the kiliocosm sovereign's true body outside the progenitor kiliocosm. Boom! As his soul returned, a complete small kiliocosm origin also fused into his small kiliocosm. Lin Feng had never given up on nurturing the kiliocosm sovereign-level boundary stone. For such a long time, all he lacked was a large amount of small kiliocosm origin. Now, it was timely help completely replenishing the small kiliocosm origin. Hence, Lin Feng's internal small kiliocosm shook violently. Countless rules gathered, forming a miraculous boundary stone. The kiliocosm sovereign-level boundary stone had been produced. Kiliocosm sovereign-level boundary stone. Lin Feng looked at this unique boundary stone. It was fundamentally different from 3-star boundary stones. This kiliocosm sovereign-level boundary stone seemed to be nurturing a small kiliocosm. It was entirely the embodiment of the rules of Lin Feng's internal small kiliocosm, and was very miraculous. Just this kiliocosm sovereign-level boundary stone had directly sucked dry the results of Lin Feng's effort this time, a complete portion of small kiliocosm origin. Added to the small kiliocosm origin that he had consumed to nurture it previously, it was indeed very, very difficult to nurture a kiliocosm sovereign-level boundary stone. However, it was ultimately nurtured. With a kiliocosm sovereign-level boundary stone, the next step was to find the bearer for this kiliocosm sovereign-level boundary stone. Only by using the kiliocosm sovereign-level boundary stone could its value be displayed. If the chaotic dojo had a pseudo-kiliocosm sovereign presiding over it, Lin Feng would be much more at ease even in the void. Without a kiliocosm sovereign presiding over the dojo, it would ultimately be rootless, and there would be all kinds of trouble. It's time to leave. Lin Feng glanced behind at the progenitor kiliocosm, which was already on the verge of collapse. This small kiliocosm had already been completely destroyed. Even Lin Feng could not save it. Lin Feng had triggered the epical cataclysm in advance, causing the primogenitor world to fail to survive it. Then, just like kiliocosm sovereigns, since it failed to survive the epical cataclysm, the small kiliocosm would also collapse and be annihilated before finally turning to dust. Although this progenitor kiliocosm was somewhat related to Lin Feng naturally did not care much about it. As a kiliocosm sovereign, he would definitely see many such things in the future. Buzz. Lin Feng manifested the river of spacetime. Then, he leaped into the river of spacetime and disappeared. The entire Chaos Dojo was filled with gloom now. Many divas were worried. The reason was very simple. Almost no one in the Chaos Dojo could be deployed now, and they were all holed up in the Chaos Dojo. Many 3-star supremacies originally headed to the small Kiliacosms to fight for the small Kiliacosm origin, but an unknown faction targeted 3-star supremacies of the Chaos Dojo repeatedly, causing the 3-star supremacies of the Chaos Dojo to suffer heavy losses. However, the Chaos Dojo could not come up with a way to counterattack. Even opening the Ascension passage and bringing their people back was too much to hope for. Many supremacies in the dojo felt a little discouraged by this. Faced with such a situation, although Supremacy Epic was anxious, there was nothing he could do. No matter how strong his abilities were, he was ultimately only a 3-star supremacy, not a Kiliacosm sovereign. His strength was limited. I wonder when His Majesty the Kiliacosm sovereign will return? Supremacy Epic still held anticipations in his heart. But suddenly, a strange fluctuation descended on Supremacy Epic. Supremacy Epic, come to the secret chamber to meet me quickly. A familiar voice entered Supremacy Epic's ears. His entire body shook, and then a trace of joy appeared in his eyes. He had returned. The Kiliacosm sovereign had finally returned. He had been looking forward to it for so long, and now the Kiliacosm sovereign had finally returned. Swoosh! Supremacy Epic stood up almost immediately and came to the secret chamber of the dojo. As expected, in the secret chamber, Supremacy Epic saw the Chaos Kiliacosm sovereign, Lin Feng, at a glance. Your Majesty, you're finally back. Supremacy Epic had been under immense pressure. With Lin Feng's return, all this pressure dissipated. Thank you for your hard work, Supremacy Epic. Tell me about what happened with the Chaos Dojo recently. Lin Feng knew that the Chaos Dojo must have had a difficult time while he was away. However, as Supremacy Epic explained, Lin Feng's expression gradually darkened. Although there was no direct evidence that those factions that targeted the Chaos Dojo were influenced by Kiliacosm Sovereign Nonary Star, Lin Feng was certain that Kiliacosm Sovereign Nonary Star was definitely involved. Right now, Lin Feng could not keep overseeing the entire Chaos Dojo. After all, there was the threat of Kiliacosm Sovereign Nonary Star. Even if Kiliacosm Sovereign Nonary Star did not appear directly, it might fail to hold out if just some other Kiliacosm sovereigns appeared. However, without Lin Feng presiding over the Chaos Dojo, it would practically be made of paper and broken with a single poke. The current foundation of the Chaos Dojo was still very insufficient, and it lacked a Kiliacosm sovereign. In particular, it lacked a pseudo-Kiliacosm sovereign. A pseudo-Kiliacosm sovereign could do many things, especially helping the Kiliacosm sovereign to preside over the training hall. That would be very useful. Supremacy Epic. Look at this. Originally, Lin Feng was still a little hesitant, but now that he learned about the situation of the Chaos Dojo, Lin Feng no longer hesitated. He took out the Kiliacosm Sovereign Level Boundary Stone directly. Buzz. Lin Feng held the Kiliacosm Sovereign Level Boundary Stone, which emitted a special fluctuation in his hand. As soon as Supremacy Epic saw this boundary stone, he was deeply attracted to it. It was like a lodestone, firmly attracting the Supremacy Epic's gaze. This is a Kiliacosm Sovereign Level Boundary Stone. Supremacy Epic's entire body was trembling. He was not someone ignorant. He had seen many 1-star, 2-star, and even 3-star boundary stones. In fact, there was a 3-star boundary stone that could be considered the limit in his body. However, no matter what kind of boundary stone it was far inferior to the magnificent, vast, and seemingly unfathomable aura of the boundary stone in front of him. It was as if this boundary stone nurtured a terrifying energy and a small Kiliacosm. This was a Kiliacosm Sovereign Level Boundary Stone. It possessed the complete rules of a small Kiliacosm, and possessed a massive amount of energy. In fact, just this tiny boundary stone could create a Kiliacosm sovereign. Although they'd be a pseudo-Kiliacosm sovereign, their strength and abilities were no different from a 1-cataclysm Kiliacosm sovereign. At most, they could not evolve a small Kiliacosm and could not increase their strength. To those controllers who used boundary stones, becoming a pseudo-Kiliacosm sovereign was the ultimate goal of cultivation. No wonder Supremacy Epic was so excited. Even for him, the Kiliakosm sovereign-level boundary stone was a supreme treasure he dreamed of obtaining. Now, such a supreme treasure had appeared in front of him. That's right. This is the Kiliakosm sovereign-level boundary stone. Supremacy Epic. I'll bestow this boundary stone to you. How confident are you in becoming a Kiliakosm sovereign? Lin Feng asked in a low voice. Your Majesty, I've long become a peak 3-star supremacy, and can no longer improve. Normally speaking, as long as my internal Kiliakosm domain can hold out when using the Kiliakosm sovereign-level boundary stone, there would basically not be much danger. All right, I'll stand guard for you. You have to become a Kiliakosm sovereign as soon as possible. When you become a Kiliakosm sovereign and preside over the Chaos Dojo, all the cheap shots and tricks from before would be resolved. You can resolve them yourself. Supremacy Epic was overwhelmed with emotions. He nodded and took the Kiliakosm sovereign-level boundary stone from Lin Feng. Wasn't his lifelong dream and goal to become a Kiliakosm sovereign? He would be satisfied even if it was a pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereign. And now, the opportunity was right in front of him. Supremacy Epic naturally would not miss it. Hence, Supremacy Epic took a deep breath and swept this Kiliakosm sovereign-level boundary stone into his internal Kiliakosm domain directly. Rumble. Supremacy Epic's internal Kiliakosm domain shook wildly. After fusing with the Kiliakosm sovereign-level boundary stone, Supremacy Epic's internal Kiliakosm domain underwent a tremendous change. The Kiliakosm domain was instantly torn apart, as if it was on the verge of collapse. However, as the Supremacy Epic integrated everything into the Kiliakosm sovereign-level boundary stone, new rules that completely surpassed the rules of his internal Kiliakosm domain appeared. Those were the small Kiliakosm rules. Or rather, they were the rules of Lin Feng's small Kiliakosm. These rules constructed the framework of an entire small Kiliakosm, but it was not under Supremacy Epic's control. From the Kiliakosm sovereign-level boundary stone, these rules slowly fused into Supremacy Epic's internal Kiliakosm domain. Regardless of how the internal Kiliakosm domain collapsed, these rules quickly constructed a framework. Then, the Kiliakosm sovereign-level boundary stone suddenly exploded. The entire Kiliakosm domain was instantly torn apart, before expanding wildly. Vast energy wreaked havoc in all directions wildly. Supremacy Epic's internal Kiliakosm domain instantly expanded by 100, 1,000, then 10,000 times in the face of this terrifying energy. Moreover, it was expanding rapidly, and gradually began to evolve. Or rather, this was not an evolution at all. It was just a replica of Lin Feng's internal small Kiliakosm, and was completely identical to Lin Feng's small Kiliakosm. The stable entities in Lin Feng's small Kiliakosm all had templates. Lin Feng had already proven that his internal small Kiliakosm was absolutely stable and absolutely safe. Hence, with Lin Feng's internal small Kiliakosm as the template, when the Kiliakosm sovereign-level boundary stone evolved a small Kiliakosm, it would undoubtedly be very safe. There would be almost no accidents. As time passed, the tremors in the Supremacy Epic's body began to gradually calm down. His internal Kiliakosm domain had expanded by countless times, perhaps 1,000,000 times or billions of times. In short, Supremacy Epic sensed a terrifying power that was completely different from before. It was simply infinite and majestic. It was as if anything could be crushed into dust by this power. This was supremacy. This was invincibility. This was majesty. This was the Kiliakosm sovereign. At the same time, Lin Feng also sensed an aura that was almost identical to his internal small Kiliakosm. Moreover, it was very unique. He seemed to be able to control the rules of Supremacy Epic's internal small Kiliakosm. With a thought from him, Supremacy Epic's internal small Kiliakosm would collapse completely. In other words, he could control the life and death of the Supremacy Epic with a thought. I see. Lin Feng came to a realization. Only after truly creating a pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereign did he understand why those Kiliakosm sovereigns trusted the pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereigns so much. Every pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereign was the right-hand man of the true Kiliakosm sovereign, and their trusted aide. This was because the life and death of the pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereign was completely in the hands of the Kiliakosm sovereign. Even if the pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereign wanted to do something, the Kiliakosm sovereign would know everything. The pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereign would never betray the true Kiliakosm sovereign, and they could not betray them even if they wanted to. It was actually very appropriate to say that the pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereign was the shadow of the true Kiliakosm sovereign. The Kiliakosm sovereign is really miraculous. When I was a 3-star supremacy in the past, I was really limited by my perspective. The Kiliakosm sovereign is really supreme. Supremacy epic, or rather, Kiliakosm sovereign epic, was also very emotional. Although he often saw Lin Feng in the past, when one saw a Kiliakosm sovereign, if the Kiliakosm sovereign did not deliberately display it, how could a 3-star supremacy understand the majesty of a Kiliakosm sovereign? Only after truly becoming a Kiliakosm sovereign himself could one understand the majesty of a Kiliakosm sovereign. Congratulations, Kiliakosm sovereign epic. You've become a Kiliakosm sovereign. All of this is thanks to His Majesty the Kiliakosm sovereign. Kiliakosm sovereign epic knew very well that his life was still in Lin Feng's hands. He could not even think of betraying Lin Feng. In front of Lin Feng, he was even weaker than those 3-star supremacies. However, Kiliakosm sovereign epic was not dissatisfied. This was the price one had to pay to become a pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereign. He was already satisfied with just being inferior to one person. Kiliakosm sovereign epic. Do you know what faction is opposing our Chaos Dojo? A sharp glint flashed across Lin Feng's eyes. Since Kiliakosm sovereign epic had already become a Kiliakosm sovereign, Lin Feng could truly be assured and begin to prepare for the counterattack. Kiliakosm sovereign epic hesitated for a moment, but he still said in a low voice, "According to my investigation, there are actually many factions that are more or less related to other Kiliakosm sovereigns. However, the one who really spared no effort and attacked our Chaos Dojo with full force should be the Prowling Dragon Dojo." Prowling Dragon Dojo? That's right. The Kiliakosm sovereign of the Prowling Dragon Dojo is a 2-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. Moreover, he's a veteran 2-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign who's almost about to undergo the 3rd epical cataclysm. Besides, there's only one pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereign in the Prowling Dragon Dojo, and his name is Kiliakosm Sovereign Feral Dragon. Back in the Radiant Kiliakosm, a total of 3 3-star supremacies of our Chaos Dojo were all killed by the 3-star supremacies of the Prowling Dragon Dojo. Lin Feng nodded, also pondering over the information on the Prowling Dragon Dojo. Lin Feng was actually very unfamiliar with the Prowling Dragon Dojo, and did not even have much information about it. He only knew that Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon was a 2-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. However, he normally did not interact much with Lin Feng. Why would he make things difficult for the Chaos Dojo time and time again? Lin Feng thought of Kiliakosm Sovereign Nonary Star. However, what could Kiliakosm Sovereign Nonary Star offer to make Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon take action? After all, Kiliakosm sovereigns were not ordinary controllers like 1-star, 2-star, or 3-star supremacies. Only the small Kiliakosm origin could truly tempt a Kiliakosm sovereign. But the small Kiliakosm origin was incomparably scarce, even for Kiliakosm Sovereign Nonary Star. How could he be willing to offer it to Kiliakosm Sovereign Feral Dragon? Could it be for Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyhorn? Lin Feng had some more guesses, but these were only guesses and had not been confirmed. We are far inferior to the Prowling Dragon Dojo, especially in terms of foundation. They have too many 3-star supremacies, while we have suffered heavy losses and have already lost the qualifications to compete with them in the small Kiliakosms. Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic's expression was also very solemn. Lin Feng's expression turned cold as he said, "Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic, I'm afraid you'll have to personally take action on this matter. The Radiant Kiliakosm, right? There are many supremacies of the Prowling Dragon Dojo in the Radiant Kiliakosm. You've just become a Kiliakosm sovereign, so it's not appropriate for you to descend. In that case, let's flip the table." Flip the table? Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic was a little confused. That's right. Flip the table. You can't descend and we can't send down 3-star supremacies anymore. In any case, all our 3-star supremacies in the radiant kiliocosm have been killed, and not a single one is left. So, let's destroy the entire radiant kiliocosm. What? Destroy the entire radiant kiliocosm? There are still supremacies from the other dojos there. So what? You're a kiliocosm sovereign. Even if you're a pseudo-kiliocosm sovereign, you're still a kiliocosm sovereign. When the kiliocosm sovereign is enraged, destroying a small kiliocosm is nothing. Humph, do those dojos really dare to make an enemy of us for the sake of some mere supremacies? Don't worry, as long as we're alive, we're a deterrent in and of ourselves. No one will dare to do anything to us. Lin Feng sneered, his body emitting a cold killing intent. At his current status and level, no matter how much mercy he had, he would not care about the other living beings in the small kiliocosm. This was like a cycle. There were countless small kiliocosms and countless living beings. Why would he care? In the eyes of the strong, even if they did not deliberately treat the weak as ants, the difference in strength was inevitable, and the weak might as well be ants. Go, Kiliocosm Sovereign Epic. It's time for our Chaos Dojo to counterattack. Yes, Your Majesty, the Kiliocosm Sovereign. Kiliocosm Sovereign Epic drew a deep breath. His face showed slight solemnity, but there seemed to be a trace of excitement. He left the Chaos Dojo, locked onto the location of the Radiant Kiliocosm, and left the Medium Kiliocosm directly. Many descenders gathered in the Radiant Kiliocosm. This was a relatively huge small kiliocosm. Up until now, it had already experienced 6 epical cataclysms. Now, it was not far from the 7th epical cataclysm. The 3-star supremacies from many dojos all descended and began to make arrangements, quietly waiting for the arrival of the epical cataclysm. At that time, they could attack and seize the small kiliocosm origin. Of course, there was no lack of battles. Even battles between dojos were simply commonplace. Even 3-star supremacies had fallen. Back then, when the 3-star supremacies of the Chaos Dojo were killed, although it also caused some commotion, people lost interest in it very quickly. The Prowling Dragon Dojo had the most extensive management and the greatest influence in the Radiant Kiliocosm. Since the first epical cataclysm, the Prowling Dragon Dojo had already descended into the Radiant Kiliocosm. Its power could be said to be deeply rooted. Every time the epical cataclysm occurred, it would bring back a lot of small kiliocosm origins for Kiliocosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon. Many supremacies of the Prowling Dragon Dojo were still a little worried about the 3-star supremacies of the Chaos Dojo who were killed last time. Of course they were worried. Those were 3-star supremacies of the Chaos Dojo, and they were clearly opposed to each other. They were afraid of being involved in a battle between Kiliocosm sovereigns. It had to be known that in a battle between Kiliocosm sovereigns, even 3-star supremacies would definitely die if they interfered. In a battle between great Kiliocosm sovereigns, mere 3-star supremacies were not even qualified to interfere. They were not afraid of the other 3-star supremacies, but they were afraid of interfering in a battle between Kiliocosm sovereigns. So what if Kiliocosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon was behind them? When a true Kiliocosm sovereign attacked and crushed them, it was as effortless as crushing a few ants. Fortunately, after they attacked the 3-star supremacies of the Chaos Dojo last time, the Kiliocosm Sovereign of the Chaos Dojo had yet to make a move until now. He must have been held back by Kiliocosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon, so they gradually relaxed. We must do our best to fight for the small Kiliocosm origin this time, and help His Majesty the Kiliocosm Sovereign successfully survive the 3rd epical cataclysm. That's right. Once he passes the 3rd epical cataclysm, His Majesty the Kiliocosm Sovereign might even have a chance of nurturing a 2nd Kiliocosm Sovereign level boundary stone. At that time, we will all have a chance to obtain the 2nd Kiliocosm Sovereign level boundary stone. The 1st Kiliocosm Sovereign level boundary stone was obtained by Kiliocosm Sovereign Feral Dragon. This time it should be our turn. After all, we've been guarding the Radiant Kiliocosm for a few epochs. We still have to be careful and make thorough arrangements. We're not the only ones in the Radiant Kiliocosm currently. Heh, what's there to be afraid of? Nothing happened after we killed the 3-star supremacies of the Chaos Dojo last time. The 3-star supremacies of the other dojos also saw it. How can they still dare to fight with us? There were a total of 6 3-star supremacies in the Prowling Dragon Dojo. This was enough to show how much importance the Prowling Dragon Dojo placed on the Radiant Kiliacosm. They were also undoubtedly the top faction in the Radiant Kiliacosm. The last time they attacked the 3 3-star supremacies of the Chaos Dojo, although they were under orders from the Kiliacosm Sovereign, killing the 3 3-star supremacies still intimidated the 3-star supremacies of the other dojos. They believed that their gains from competing for the small Kiliacosm origin in this epical cataclysm would be significant. Heh! I heard that there's no trace of the Kiliacosm Sovereign of the Chaos Dojo anymore. Our great Kiliacosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon is still the best. Of course, although the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign killed Kiliacosm Sovereign Skyhorn, Kiliacosm Sovereign Skyhorn is only a 1 Cataclysm Kiliacosm Sovereign. Even our Kiliacosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon can easily kill him. Even if the Chaos Dojo wants to take revenge, they don't have the foundation for it. Suddenly, just as the many 3-star supremacies of the Prowling Dragon Dojo were discussing, a magnificent and loud voice echoed throughout the entire small Kiliacosm. The Prowling Dragon Dojo killed the supremacies of the Chaos Dojo. I am epic, and I will destroy this world in severe punishment. What? Everyone looked at the void beyond the radiant Kiliacosm in shock. That magnificent and loud voice echoed in the sky of the radiant Kiliacosm for a long time. At the same time, an infinitely huge palm emitting a faint golden light actually enveloped the entire radiant Kiliacosm. That terrifying pressure made all the supremacies tremble. Even the radiant Kiliacosm was suppressed to the extreme, as if it was on the verge of collapse. That is a Kiliacosm Sovereign. The Kiliacosm Sovereign's true body. This is a full power strike from the Kiliacosm Sovereign's true body. The Kiliacosm Sovereign of Chaos Dojo is not the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign, but Supremacy Epic. No, he's no longer a supremacy. He's become a Kiliacosm Sovereign. A pseudo-Kiliacosm Sovereign. Save us. Great Kiliacosm Sovereign Feral Dragon. Save us. Looking at the incomparably huge palm in the void, not only did the people of the Prowling Dragon Dojo panic, even the other supremacies of the Radiant Kiliacosm were panicking. This was no joke. That was the true body of a Kiliacosm Sovereign attacking personally. Even if he was a pseudo-Kiliacosm Sovereign, that was the true body of a Kiliacosm Sovereign. It could not be easier for him to destroy a small Kiliacosm. Once it was destroyed, all of them would be annihilated. No one had expected the Chaos Dojo to be so unyielding. Even if they took down all the supremacies in the Radiant Kiliacosm in one fell swoop, they would not let the people of the Prowling Dragon Dojo off. Moreover, what was even more terrifying was that the Chaos Kiliacosm Sovereign had actually nurtured a Kiliacosm Sovereign-level boundary stone in such a short period of time, and even allowed Supremacy Epic to become a Kiliacosm Sovereign. This was simply unbelievable. However, the truth was right in front of them. They had no choice but to believe it. The Radiant Kiliacosm was in danger. Countless supremacies were informing the Kiliacosm Sovereigns behind them. However, the ones who were truly furious were only Kiliacosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon and Kiliacosm Sovereign Feral Dragon of the Prowling Dragon Dojo, especially Kiliacosm Sovereign Feral Dragon. This was because he was directly in charge of this matter. Kiliacosm Sovereign Feral Dragon was also directly in charge of matters of the entire dojo. He was also a pseudo-Kiliacosm Sovereign, and this was his responsibility in the first place. What? Supremacy Epic has become a Kiliacosm Sovereign? He even wants to destroy the entire Radiant Kiliacosm. Kiliacosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon was dumbfounded. He never expected things to develop so quickly. The Chaos Dojo actually had a pseudo-Kiliacosm Sovereign too. A pseudo-Kiliacosm Sovereign was not terrifying. What was terrifying was that there was a true Kiliacosm Sovereign hidden in the dark, and no one could find him. That was an invisible deterrent in itself. Who would dare to underestimate him? How dare you, Kiliacosm Sovereign Epic? I will fight you to the death. Kiliacosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon's eyes seemed to have turned bloodshot. He instantly disappeared from the Prowling Dragon Dojo. Destroy. Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic mobilized the power of his internal small Kiliakosm. This was a full power strike from him. Just one strike could destroy the entire small Kiliakosm. This majestic power mesmerized and shocked even Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic. This was a true greater divine ability, a true majestic ability. Boom! As the Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic's palm slammed down hard, the radiant Kiliakosm seemed to wail immediately. Immediately, right on the heels of it, the entire world collapsed under the heavy pressure, gradually turning into dust. At this moment, a roar came from the void. Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic, if you dare to destroy the radiant Kiliakosm, I will fight you to the death. The voice approached from afar in a mighty manner, echoing in the void. Boom! As the voice approached, a figure suddenly appeared in front of the Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic. By then, it was already too late. The strike of a Kiliakosm Sovereign had already caused the radiant Kiliakosm to collapse, and it was already irreversible. Kiliakosm Sovereign Feral Dragon. I'm afraid you're too late. Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic retracted his hand and stood with his hands behind his back. He looked at Kiliakosm Sovereign Feral Dragon calmly. He knew that although Kiliakosm Sovereign Feral Dragon had become a Kiliakosm Sovereign much earlier than him, he was only a pseudo-Kiliakosm Sovereign. It was very, very difficult for a pseudo-Kiliakosm Sovereign to increase his strength. Since he could not advance in realm, if he wanted to increase his strength, he had to use some supreme treasures or other methods to increase his strength. However, what kind of supreme treasure could be effective against a Kiliakosm Sovereign? Hence, even though Kiliakosm Sovereign Feral Dragon had become a pseudo-Kiliakosm Sovereign a long time ago, Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic was not afraid. Damn it! Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic! How dare you! Kiliakosm Sovereign Feral Dragon's expression was very dark. The radiant Kiliakosm had already entered a state of irreversible collapse. Kiliakosm Sovereign Feral Dragon's face was ashen as he stared intently at the Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic. He really did not expect Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic to be so unyielding as to attack the radiant Kiliakosm directly. Moreover, he destroyed the entire Kiliakosm. There were even many supremacies from other dojos within, and he destroyed it just like that. Or rather, this was not the Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic being unyielding, but the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign behind Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic being unyielding. Clearly, the Chaos Dojo had already begun to counterattack, and its counterattack was very fatal, destroying the Radiant Kiliakosm in one fell swoop. It had to be known that the Radiant Kiliakosm was one of the most stable sources of small Kiliakosm origin for the Prowling Dragon Dojo. Now, it had been directly destroyed. Seeing that the Radiant Kiliakosm had already been destroyed, Kiliakosm Sovereign Feral Dragon could not remedy it. However, it was impossible for him to just let it be. Kiliakosm Sovereign Feral Dragon stared at Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic. The small Kiliakosm power on his body gradually gathered. Then, he said coldly, "Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic, I didn't expect you to also become a Kiliakosm Sovereign. That's just as well. Today, I'll see what Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic can do." At this moment, Kiliakosm Sovereign Feral Dragon truly developed killing intent. I was just about to ask for guidance. Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic also knew that there would be no reconciliation today. In that case, he would not hold back. Boom! Although the two Kiliakosm Sovereigns were only pseudo-Kiliakosm Sovereigns, their strength was not much inferior to one Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereigns. Besides, they were ultimately Kiliakosm Sovereigns. Once they fought, how big would the commotion be? Moreover, the two of them did not conceal anything from anyone, and fought directly in the Radiant Kiliakosm. Small Kiliakosms collided wildly, and shockwaves spread in all directions majestically. Fortunately, the Radiant Kiliakosm had already been destroyed. Otherwise, if there was any small Kiliakosm, it would probably be severely damaged or even destroyed by the shockwaves. The two of them caused too much commotion, and the Radiant Kiliakosm was destroyed. Many Kiliakosm Sovereigns saw the Kiliakosm destroyed before they could open the Ascension passage and retrieve their own 3-star supremacies. Hence, many Kiliakosm Sovereigns were actually rather furious with Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic and the Chaos Dojo. However, they were only angered. They would not stand up for mere supremacies. Kiliakosm's sovereign epic's act must be supported by the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign. The Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign was simply too unyielding. He had directly destroyed a small Kiliakosm, and his target was the Kiliakosm sovereign feral dragon. Everyone knew the reason. Some time ago, for some unknown reason, the Prowling Dragon Dojo pushed the Chaos Dojo too hard. They almost took down all the forces of the Chaos Dojo in the small Kiliakosm in one fell swoop. They originally thought that since the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign never made a move, he had swallowed his anger. Who would have thought that the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign would be so unyielding? It was not that he would not attack, but that the time was not right. Now that he launched an attack, it was vicious from the get-go. For a moment, many Kiliakosm sovereigns were a little surprised. After all, Kiliakosm sovereigns had long lifespans and were high and mighty. Apart from the epical cataclysms, there was almost no danger. However, the Chaos Dojo's actions were undoubtedly insane, and made even the Kiliakosm sovereigns wary. Lin Feng's actions told everyone that the Chaos Dojo was not at the mercy of others, nor was it defenseless. If they angered him, he was willing to put lives on the line. The Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign is really, well, very aggressive. Kiliakosm's sovereign Prowling Dragon has miscalculated this time. If this actually goes on, their gains would not make up for the losses. Kiliakosm's sovereign Prowling Dragon has a close relationship with Kiliakosm's sovereign Nonary Star, but so what? What benefits can he obtain if he acts as the vanguard? Don't forget that the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign is very cautious. Up until now, his true body is still in the void. No one can find the location of his true body. That's right. Moreover, the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign quietly nurtured a Kiliakosm sovereign level boundary stone, allowing Supremacy Epic to become Kiliakosm sovereign epic. Now that there's a new pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereign presiding over the Chaos Dojo, they're basically completely safe. Unless Kiliakosm's sovereign Prowling Dragon really wants to fight the Chaos Sovereign to the death at all costs, he won't attack Kiliakosm's sovereign epic. Kiliakosm's sovereign feral dragon alone can't do anything to Kiliakosm's sovereign epic. Many Kiliakosm sovereigns were discussing Epic Fist, Great Feral Dragon Palm. Kiliakosm's sovereign feral dragon and Kiliakosm's sovereign epic were still entangled and fighting. The two dignified Kiliakosm sovereigns used different abilities, but there was actually no difference in using fists or palms. This was because they were both using small Kiliakosm power. What truly determined the outcome was the power of the small Kiliakosm. Bang! The two of them had clashed head-on more than once, but Kiliakosm's sovereign feral dragon and Kiliakosm's sovereign epic were evenly matched. Neither could do anything to the other. With their regenerative ability, forget about 3 days and 3 nights, even if they fought for 3 years, 30 years, or even 300 years, there would probably be no winner. As for killing their opponent, that was even more impossible. After all, not everyone had the principle of spacetime. Otherwise, Lin Feng would not have received so much attention when he killed Kiliakosm's sovereign Skyhorn. Kiliakosm's sovereign feral dragon. Neither of us can do anything to the other. Do you still want to continue fighting? Kiliakosm's sovereign epic stood with his hands behind his back and said calmly, "Humph." Kiliakosm's sovereign feral dragon snorted coldly. Although he did not say anything, he was carefully sensing the surrounding void. He did not sense the aura of any other Kiliakosm sovereign apart from Kiliakosm's sovereign epic. This meant that the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign Lin Feng was not near Kiliakosm's sovereign epic. Even Kiliakosm's sovereign Prowling Dragon, who was behind him, could not deduce Lin Feng's exact location. If the battle went on like this, even if a winner was decided between the two Kiliakosm sovereigns, it would actually be meaningless. Kiliakosm's sovereign epic. Tell the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign behind you that he's a coward if he keeps hiding. Even if we lose the Radiant Kiliakosm today, it's actually nothing to our Prowling Dragon Dojo, and we won't lose much. However, your Chaos Dojo can forget about ever sending down a controller. If you can't send down controllers, you won't be able to obtain small Kiliakosm origin. If the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign continues to hide like this, He probably won't even be able to survive the second epical cataclysm. Kiliakosm's sovereign feral dragon sneered and said, "Is that so? I don't know if I can survive the second epical cataclysm either, but I do know that Kiliakosm's sovereign feral dragon is in danger of falling today." Suddenly, a cold voice sounded, echoing in the void. Kiliakosm's sovereign feral dragon was shocked and terrified. He suddenly raised his head and stared intently at the void in front of him. "Chaos Kiliakosm's sovereign, you actually dare to appear?" Kiliakosm's sovereign feral dragon enunciated each word clearly, his expression filled with disbelief. "What? The Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign has appeared. That's indeed the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign." When the true body of the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign was hidden in the void, no one could find him. How dare he appear? I'm afraid Kiliakosm's sovereign feral dragon couldn't be happier about the Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign's appearance. The Chaos Kiliakosm sovereign is a little unwise. Looking at the figure that suddenly appeared in the void, many great entities were communicating in secret. Most of them were very surprised. No one had expected Lin Feng to appear at this moment. After all, everyone knew that Kiliakosm's sovereign prowling dragon was waiting for Lin Feng's true body to appear. "Your Majesty, why are you here? Leave quickly." Even Kiliakosm's sovereign epic was very surprised, but also very anxious. He knew that, in the current situation, Kiliakosm's sovereign prowling dragon would not let the matter rest. Yet Lin Feng had appeared at this moment. Wasn't this giving Kiliakosm's sovereign prowling dragon a chance? After all, Kiliakosm's sovereign prowling dragon was a two-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. Lin Feng's gaze was calm. Actually, he had been nearby the entire time. Ever since he returned to the Chaos Dojo, he learned about how the Chaos Dojo was in a very difficult situation and unable to make any moves. This time, if he continued to hide instead of intimidating the other factions with some ruthlessness, there was probably no knowing if the Chaos Dojo would still exist the next time he returned. However, the one who was most afraid at this moment was Kiliakosm's sovereign feral dragon. With Lin Feng's appearance, Kiliakosm's sovereign feral dragon felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Even though he was a dignified Kiliakosm sovereign, he did not even dare to make threats at this moment. In front of Lin Feng, he did not want to provoke Lin Feng anymore. After all, Lin Feng was someone with unparalleled ruthlessness, who had killed an ancestral devil and a true Kiliakosm sovereign. His vicious reputation spread far and wide. Even if he had the support of Kiliakosm's sovereign prowling dragon, he did not dare to resist Lin Feng in person. Kill! Lin Feng did not waste his breath. He only had one goal for appearing, and that was to kill Kiliakosm's sovereign feral dragon. If he killed a pseudo-Kiliakosm sovereign, he should be able to wake Kiliakosm's sovereign prowling dragon up a little. If Kiliakosm's sovereign prowling dragon also went insane and attacked the Chaos Dojo, Lin Feng would respond with even more insanity. He did not believe that Kiliakosm's sovereign prowling dragon would be even crazier than him, because it was not worth it at all. Lin Feng was doing this for himself. He could risk his life, but why was Kiliakosm's sovereign prowling dragon doing this? Wasn't it just to obtain a little benefit from Kiliakosm's sovereign nonary star? If he really fought Lin Feng to the death, the gains truly would not make up for the losses. Of course, the prerequisite was that Lin Feng was not stopped by Kiliakosm's sovereign prowling dragon. Otherwise, all of Lin Feng's advantages would be gone, and he might even be at risk of dying. River of Spacetime. Lin Feng used a killing move as soon as he attacked. He used his core power without hesitation. A mighty river of spacetime instantly enveloped Kiliakosm's sovereign feral dragon. Ah no! Kiliakosm's sovereign feral dragon struggled with all his might. He knew that Kiliakosm's sovereign skyhorn had died to Lin Feng's river of spacetime back then. This was the principle of spacetime, and it was already an open secret in the medium Kiliakosm. Everyone knew that Lin Feng grasped the principle of spacetime and could even kill a Kiliakosm sovereign. Epic Fist. Seeing Lin Feng attack, Kiliakosm's sovereign epic also abandoned all his reservations at this moment. He mobilized the power of his internal small Kiliakosm and threw a punch at Kiliakosm's sovereign feral dragon. Originally, just dealing with Lin Feng's river of spacetime alone was already a little difficult for Kiliakazam's sovereign feral dragon. Now, he was jointly attacked by the two of them. At once, Kiliakazam's sovereign feral dragon did not even hold out for the span of a breath before being swept into the river of spacetime. Kiliakazam's sovereign prowling dragon. Save me! Kiliakazam's sovereign feral dragon called out loudly. He knew very well what would happen once he was swept into the river of spacetime. Just look at Kiliakazam's sovereign sky horn. Even a true Kiliakazam sovereign could not withstand it, let alone a pseudo-Kiliakazam sovereign like Kiliakazam's sovereign feral dragon. Lin Feng's strength improved further again. At the very least, nurturing the Kiliakazam sovereign level boundary stone allowed Lin Feng's internal small Kiliakazam to expand by a little. Even though it was only a little, it was extremely precious. At the very least, it allowed Lin Feng to know that even without epical cataclysms, the small Kiliakazam could still expand. It was just that the expansion was very slow. Lin Feng could see at a glance that the aura on Kiliakazam's sovereign feral dragon, who was in the river of spacetime, was rapidly weakening. It was even weakening much faster than Kiliakazam's sovereign skyhorn previously. After all, a true Kiliakazam sovereign was much stronger than a pseudo-Kiliakazam sovereign. In just a few breaths, Kiliakazam's sovereign feral dragon had already sunk into the river of spacetime. It was only a matter of time before he fell completely. They're here! Lin Feng suddenly looked up. He sensed a terrifying aura approaching rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it had already arrived in front of Lin Feng. Boom! Small Kiliakazam power. A mighty small Kiliakazam power descended, ready to envelop Lin Feng. At the same time, a magnificent voice boomed in the void like thunder. Release Kiliakazam sovereign feral dragon. Kiliakazam sovereign epic's heart skipped a beat. He recognized this figure. Kiliakazam sovereign prowling dragon. It's Kiliakazam sovereign prowling dragon. The two cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign prowling dragon. He was far stronger than Kiliakazam's sovereign skyhorn back then. He came very quickly, rushing over almost the moment Lin Feng appeared. However, he was ultimately a little late. Lin Feng had still managed to sweep Kiliakazam's sovereign feral dragon into the river of spacetime at top speed. Kiliakazam's sovereign prowling dragon is also here. This is really tit for tat. A 2 cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign is not comparable to a 1 cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign. The Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign is in trouble. The Chaos Kiliakazam sovereign is still too insane and overconfident. A 2 cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign can suppress a 1 cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign without much effort. The difference in strength between the two is too great. Seeing that Kiliakazam's sovereign prowling dragon had appeared so quickly and Lin Feng had yet to escape, many Kiliakazam sovereigns shook their heads. Although Kiliakazam sovereigns rarely fought among themselves, it did not mean that these Kiliakazam sovereigns did not know the difference in strength. There were also differences in strength between Kiliakazam sovereigns. Moreover, experiencing one more cataclysm made the difference worlds apart. It was unimaginable. The terrifying small Kiliakazam power enveloped Lin Feng. Kiliakazam sovereign epic wanted to resist it with Lin Feng, but with just a glance from Kiliakazam sovereign prowling dragon, the massive small Kiliakazam power suppressed the Kiliakazam sovereign epic so much that he could not move. This was a 2 cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign. Cracks even appeared in Lin Feng's small Kiliakazam. He took a deep breath and said in a low voice, as expected of a 2 cataclysm Kiliakazam sovereign. However, Kiliakazam sovereign prowling dragon, it's no longer possible for you to save Kiliakazam sovereign feral dragon. Since I've seen your abilities, I have no regrets. We'll part ways here. The next time we meet, I'll have a good spar with you. A strange smile appeared on Lin Feng's lips. Then, the river of spacetime in the void suddenly expanded, emitting a blinding light. Lin Feng stepped into the river of spacetime and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Even though Kiliakazam's sovereign prowling dragon's small Kiliakazam suppressed the void and spanned a range of billions of miles, it was useless. Lin Feng disappeared silently from in front of him, from the Kiliakazam sovereigns who were watching the battle in secret, without leaving a trace. This is space-time? A strange glint flashed across Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon's eyes as he muttered softly. Lin Feng disappeared, leaving only the Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic behind to face the two Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon alone. It was not that Lin Feng had really abandoned Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic, but that hiding in the dark and still being alive was the greatest deterrent. Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic also understood this. Hence, he faced Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon calmly. Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon looked at the Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic calmly. He really wanted to kill the Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic. After all, Lin Feng had also killed Kiliakosm Sovereign Feral Dragon. However, he also knew very well that once he really killed Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic, Lin Feng and he would definitely be in a fight to the death. In the past, even if they would fight to the death, Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon would not have paid much heed to it. Once a Kiliakosm Sovereign was one step ahead, he would practically be always ahead. He could even devise a plot to lure Lin Feng out and kill him as well. However, this time, Lin Feng still used the River of Spacetime and escaped silently in front of him, despite being heavily suppressed by his small Kiliakosm power. Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon already understood that he could not kill Lin Feng at all. Even if he became a third Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign, it would probably be very difficult for him to kill Lin Feng. With the principle of spacetime, Lin Feng's life-preserving ability was almost unparalleled. Hence, the Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon retreated. There was no need for him to really become mortal enemies with a Kiliakosm Sovereign who was hiding in the dark, and whom he could not kill. The outcome of doing so was not worth it. All right, tell the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign that this matter is over. I'll let bygones be bygones regarding the matter of Kiliakosm Sovereign Feral Dragon. In the future, the Prowling Dragon Dojo will not find trouble with the Chaos Dojo again. With that, Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon left. After all, he had actually lost all his face by making peace with the Chaos Dojo. After all, Kiliakosm Sovereign Feral Dragon had been killed. No matter what, he was a dignified Kiliakosm Sovereign, not just a 1-star, 2-star, or 3-star supremacy. Even for Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon, it would be impossible for him to nurture another Kiliakosm Sovereign level Boundary Stone and nurture another pseudo-Kiliakosm Sovereign, at least in a short period of time. Although his heart ached, and although it was embarrassing, the Kiliakosm Sovereign was great and powerful. Who would dare to discuss it? Moreover, Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon could see very clearly that he could not control Lin Feng. Since that was the case, why not stop here? This was the wisest choice. As the Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon disappeared, Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic finally heaved a sigh of relief. In front of the Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon, he was really under a lot of pressure. After all, the other party was a dignified 2-Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign. Who knew if the Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon would fly into a rage and kill him at all costs? But from the looks of it, Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon was ultimately rational. The trouble with the Chaos Dojo seemed to have been resolved all of a sudden. He believed that after this incident, not many factions would find trouble with the Chaos Dojo again. Hence, Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic also left. As the Kiliakosm Sovereign Epic left, the Kiliakosm Sovereigns who were secretly paying attention to this battle all looked at each other. Many thoughts flashed through their minds. This battle was an eye-opener for them. In the past, they only knew that the Chaos Kiliakosm Sovereign, Lin Feng, grasped the principle of spacetime, but he seemed to be very weak. He was only a 1-Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign. Although he had killed Ancestral Devil Blood Spirit and Kiliakosm Sovereign Skyhorn, they had not seen it with their own eyes. Moreover, no matter how he killed them, he still only had the strength of a 1-Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereign. Hence, 2-Cataclysm and 3-Cataclysm Kiliakosm Sovereigns like them did not pay much attention to it. Instead, they looked at Lin Feng with a high and mighty attitude. However, things were different now. Even when Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon attacked with full force, he could not keep Lin Feng from leaving. If Lin Feng could escape from Kiliakosm Sovereign Prowling Dragon, he could also escape from them. No one dared to underestimate a Kiliakosm Sovereign with such powerful life-preserving abilities anymore. Hence, some Kiliakosm sovereigns had already returned and discreetly warned their subordinates not to target the supremacies of the Chaos Dojo. I didn't expect the principle of spacetime to be so miraculous. Looks like my worries were unnecessary. Among the many Kiliakosm sovereigns, a familiar figure flashed and disappeared completely. Buzz. In an unknown place in the distant void, suddenly, a long river appeared out of thin air. Right on the heels of that, a figure staggered and flew out of the long river. Then the long river disappeared. What powerful strength! I wouldn't have been able to hold out for any longer. A two-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. There's actually such a huge difference in strength with the difference of one cataclysm. It's simply worlds apart. Lin Feng's expression was not too good. He had fallen out of the river of spacetime suddenly, and even the river of spacetime was flickering. Fortunately, he only endured the pressure and did not damage his foundation. However, this also allowed Lin Feng to understand the difference between a one-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign and a two-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. The difference was just too great. At least for the time being, Lin Feng could only rely on the river of spacetime to survive before a two-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign. It was impossible to kill an opponent above his level, unless Lin Feng could become the two-cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign, or if he advanced by leaps and bounds in the principle of spacetime and entered a new realm. Otherwise, it would be too difficult to fight above his level. After becoming a Kiliakosm sovereign, the difference between every realm was tens of thousands of times or even greater. Every metamorphosis of the small Kiliakosm was a qualitative improvement. I have the river of spacetime in my possession. It's almost impossible for a Kiliakosm sovereign below 3 cataclysm to deal with me. Even if I can't defeat him, I can still escape. If Kiliakosm sovereign Prowling Dragon is wise enough, he will most likely leave this matter be. Lin Feng pondered. The reason he appeared and attacked this time was actually because he had judged that Kiliakosm sovereign Prowling Dragon could not kill him at all. Instead, he could use the river of spacetime to intimidate those restless Kiliakosm sovereigns. Otherwise, if Kiliakosm sovereign Prowling Dragon acted now, would the other Kiliakosm sovereigns be tempted when they saw that Lin Feng did not respond? At that time, Lin Feng might not just need to deal with Kiliakosm sovereign Prowling Dragon, but 2, 3, or even more Kiliakosm sovereigns. After all, a 7 cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign was suspected to be propelling conflicts behind the scenes. Lin Feng had no choice but to be on guard. Fortunately, the crisis was finally slightly resolved this time. It could allow Lin Feng and the Chaos Dojo to be slightly safer, but it was also temporary. If Lin Feng did not improve his strength, such dangers would definitely occur again in the future. If a Kiliakosm sovereign below 3 cataclysm could not deal with him, what about a 4 cataclysm, or even 5 cataclysm Kiliakosm sovereign? The mystery of the principle of spacetime on Lin Feng was inevitably tempting. Hence, strength was the most important thing. Lin Feng recalled that back in the small Kiliakosm, he had also cultivated in a frenzy for the sake of strength. It was not easy for him to become a Kiliakosm sovereign, so he felt that he could relax a little. Even though there were the epical cataclysms, 12 trillion years was too long for Lin Feng. Unexpectedly, Lin Feng felt a sense of urgency again now. I still have to descend. However, the progenitor Kiliakosm I descended into last time was too small. I only obtained one complete portion of the small Kiliakosm origin. If the small Kiliakosm is powerful enough, that portion can even be equivalent to a few portions of small Kiliakosm origin. Many thoughts flashed through Lin Feng's mind as well. He was no longer satisfied with just obtaining a complete portion of small Kiliakosm origin.